In the year 2000, in the year 2000, filmmakers finally discover the success of a comic book movie by casting the person everyone wanted since the 80s and another who is a whole foot taller than the character he's going to play. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss X-Men. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramie Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair is the newest member of Moving Panels, and someone who might actually know what happens when a toad gets struck by lightning. Please welcome Chad Sheppard.
Sabretooth, Storm, what do they call you? A podcast guy?
Ah, touche, touche. So Chad and I are going to discuss X-Men way back from the year 2000. Thus, the opening that I wanted to do there. Just, again, you can't say in the year 2000 without thinking of the classic Conan O'Brien.
Absolutely. Watch that all the time. That was my favorite segment. Yep.
So, let's give a little background here. So, the X-Men, the characters themselves in the comic, was Marvel's biggest title during the 80s and the 90s when people like Chad and I got to know them.
Yeah, exactly.
You had Lynn Wein, Chris Claremont, Jim Lee, just great names of comics that were doing this. I mean, when Jim Lee did the relaunch, X-Men #1, that's the best-selling comic book of all time.
That's the giant one, right?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
No, that was Chris Claremont one.
So Jim Lee, the one he did is the one that had the 4 different covers that if you laid them all side by side, it made one big picture.
Oh, yes. That's
that best-selling comic of all time right there.
And gave them their classic uniforms as well.
Yes. Which they refer to in the movie. What would you rather wear? Yellow spandex?
Yeah.
So obviously Marvel, right around this time, late 80s, early 90s, they're wanting to capitalize as much as possible. We're not going to get into the whole background here of Marvel. This is when Marvel was filing for bankruptcy, when they were kind of struggling that whole time. They had taken an attempt at movies with Howard the Duck, of course, classic there.
Oh, yes. That still gives me nightmares to this day. I don't know if it's the movie or the actual creature that comes down, but either one.
Yeah. And then you had the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie, which also tanked. By the time 90 hit, you had the Captain America 1990 movie. And then the Never to See the Light of Day, the Fantastic Four movie.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, lots of problems there. But at that whole time, there was talk about an X-Men movie. Orion Pictures actually tried to make a Fantastic movie with James Cameron. I said Fantastic Four, an X-Men movie with James Cameron. They tried to do one with Catherine Bigelow.
Wow.
And this was all in the 80s. Then when the 90s hit, Fox, who now had the licensing rights to the X-Men, they had the animated series.
Right.
Which, one of the greatest
superhero
comic.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, great cartoon. And so in '94, Fox said, "Okay, let's try for a live action movie." And they try. Here's a guy I was surprised to see on this list. At one point, tried making this movie with Andrew Kevin Walker. Do you know who Andrew Kevin Walker is?
Andrew Kevin Walker? No, I don't.
He's the guy that wrote Seven.
Wow.
Could you imagine an X-Men movie written by the guy that wrote Seven?
That would have been a totally different film, yes.
Oh.
Wow.
And of course, I say of course because he had made the X-Men famous once again by bringing them back with Astonishing X-Men. They even went with Joss Whedon for a minute.
Wow.
Again, he had done Astonishing X-Men, which is another great comic run, and he hadn't yet. He was about to get started with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Of course, we'd later know he would do the Avengers, and then he would completely tank everything with his take on Justice League, as well as his personal life, but we won't get into that.
Right, that's his own fault.
Yeah, So they finally settled on Bryan Singer. He was fresh off of his success from The Usual Suspects, which great movie, absolutely great movie. So they decided to go with him. There's a lot of I didn't put all this down. I don't want to get into all of the writing issues. There's apparently people who wrote parts of it and wrote other parts of it, and then people who asked for their name to be removed as a writer, and then they later regretted that their name's not associated with it anymore. But whatever. But we're now into the late 90s. Marvel finally has a hit. They got Blade.
It's a good film.
So, again, make the argument, what movie really kicks off the superhero boom that happened. Some people would argue Blade in 98. But you got this movie, which was intended originally to be released for Christmas of 99. They then decided because of, believe it or not, because of Steven Spielberg choosing to move the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence, Fox decided to move X-Men to a summer release, and it finally got released July 14th of the year 2000.
Wow.
It officially debuted on July 12th. They actually showed it on Ellis Island.
Yeah, that's awesome. They had the built for it since they had all those diplomats there.
Yeah. So when did you first see X-Men? Did you see it in theaters?
Yes, most definitely. Saw that in theaters. I just came home from college. Was working at Blockbuster Video.
I think we've all have.
I think, yeah. Yeah, I was working at Blockbuster and saw it. Opening day. Because I was super excited about this movie.
I was too. Just like you, huge fan of the animated series, which is one of the things that got me into comics when I was a kid.
Same.
I was in college when it came out. Don't know if I saw it opening weekend, but I'm pretty confident I saw it in theaters. Because around that time, early 2000, the time I was in college, I saw anything and everything that I had any even slight interest in. I saw it in theaters. So you were a big fan of the animated series as well?
Oh yeah, big fan of the animated series. About 93 is when I got interested in the actual comics.
So that's right after this, because the show started in 92. So
right,
yeah.
So I was big into the show. Then that's in the comics, Age of Apocalypse happened. I had every single one of them. So I was big into X-Men. One of my favorite artists at that time was Joe Madureira, and I follow him on Twitter. Shout out. But he's an amazing artist himself. But I was definitely huge in X-Men. Could not wait for this movie. It's funny that you mentioned 99. I was in college. I remember somebody had, and I wanted to bring this up. You might bring this up later, but they had an issue of Wizard in 1995. I remember this page for page. It was the stunt casting of a X-Men movie that may or may not ever happen.
Yeah. And
I was just looking at it. They got one right.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
That's exactly. So we'll go ahead and get into the characters.
Okay.
I actually, before we start talking about the characters, I actually think that in terms of the casting, they took the same approach that Superman did back in 1978. Okay. So you've got Marlon Brando playing Jor-El. You've got Gene Hackman playing Lex Luthor.
Right.
But your lead, your star, is an unknown in Christopher Reeve.
Right.
I think they pretty much did the same thing here. You get a couple of big, well-known actors, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and you use them to help boost the movie because no one's heard of Hugh Jackman at this point.
No.
And it's kind of funny because Richard Donner, who directed the original Superman movie, you may not know this, was actually the executive producer on X-Men.
Oh, I think I did know that because his daughter is the one who does the later ones, right?
Was his daughter? I thought it was his wife.
Oh, his wife. Oh, it is his wife. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's his wife.
Okay.
I could be mistaken, but I thought it was Well, she produces this one. Like she was the one that got one going.
Okay. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he actually served as executive producer on, I think, all the. I don't know about all the sequels, but I know for a good bit of the sequels. I know he was the executive producer on the movie that shall not be named. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's go ahead. We've already talked about it. Professor X, Charles Xavier, played by the person who always meant to play this role, Sir Patrick Stewart.
I don't care if Charles Xavier is from New York and an American. He speaks Patrick Stewart to me.
And it's Patrick Stewart. Yeah. I mean, of course, we're all basing that off the fact of he was Jean-Luc Picard, and he's just this. He's a bald dude. Yeah. And we all just went, hey, he'd be perfect. He's a different take on Xavier, though, because in the comics, Charles is a little bit more forceful, I guess would be the word. He's a little more stern, whereas Patrick Stewart's a little more kind-hearted.
Right.
And so...
Well, I've heard discussions that Magneto and Xavier are, civil rights. It was Stanley based on civil rights, 60s civil rights, and Charles was supposed to be MOK, and Magneto is kind of based on Malcolm X. So, I would think that Patrick Stewart kind of made his more mellow character more toward Dr. King.
Yeah, again, just to go ahead and throw this out, of course, the X-Men debuted way back in September of 1963.
Yeah.
And both, Professor X and Magneto are both in that very first issue. So let's go ahead and talk about Magneto, played by, again, Sir Ian McClellan.
Of course.
Now, again, he was not the first choice. Now, I'm curious because you brought it up. Do you remember who they said would play Magneto in that Wizard?
Was it? It was Rutger Hauer, wasn't it?
Oh, I don't remember. But
I think Rutger Hauer.
That sounds like a possibility.
Blade Runner, I think so.
Yeah, the role was actually offered, however, to Christopher Lee.
Oh.
Yeah, I would have been okay with that as well.
Yeah, that would have been all right.
It was also offered to Terrence Stamp. General Zod himself. I think you would have had a hard time with that one, with him being already recognized as General Zod, and then to also be Magneto. But
and he also had that. And he also had that movie that was a blockbuster at this time too. That was he was going after his daughter or something. It wasn't. It was almost like Taken, but not Taken.
No, I don't remember.
I
don't remember that one.
I can't remember.
Of course, I didn't work at Blockbuster until the 2000s. So I think you talking about the way that Patrick Stewart kind of maybe thought about the whole Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. I think it worked for Ian McClellan because Ian McClellan, I mean, he's an activist.
Right.
He's someone who takes stances and all that. So I think he definitely brought some of himself into the role of Magneto, in my opinion.
I agree.
Let's go ahead and move on to our unknown Wolverine, a.k.a. Logan, played by Hugh Jackman in his first Hollywood movie.
Wow.
Can you think about that this was Hugh Jackman's first Hollywood film?
No, I of all the stuff that he's done, the Greatest Showman and, all that stuff. No, I his first movie. No,
You're just speechless.
I'm speechless. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because again, Hugh Jackman is such a Hollywood star. To think that it was just a little over 20 years ago, 22 years ago, that he makes his first Hollywood movie. It's crazy. Now, he also was not originally supposed to be Wolverine. Bryan Singer, the director, wanted Russell Crowe.
Right. I read that in the 98 update of Wizard that they wanted Russell Crowe.
Yeah, but Russell Crowe turned it down, and he said, hey, I got this other Aussie friend of mine. Hugh Jackman. You should take a look at him.
Yeah, it's this guy doing Oklahoma.
Yeah, stage actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if he was doing the boy from Oz around this time. But so here he is playing Wolverine. Wolverine, who debuted in Incredible Hulk 180. Last panel of 180, fully introduced in 181. Back in 1974, against fighting the Incredible Hulk. This little dude of Wolverine, who in the comic books is supposed to be 5'3",
right?
And here comes 6'1", I think, Hugh Jackman.
6'1" or 2", yeah.
Yeah, 6'2" maybe.
Yeah.
So again, almost an entire foot taller than the character he's supposed to be playing.
Wow.
Did that trouble? Now again, it's hard to think because he's so now linked to that character. But when you saw it in 2000, did you have a problem with him being so tall?
I don't think I did. And this is going to sound silly, I wanted to be Wolverine. I'm a short
everybody
fellow.
did, yeah.
Well, I'm a short fellow who can grow facial hair. I was like, well, I could play Wolverine. So
yeah,
but but once I watched, started watching the film and just got into his character, the height didn't bother me.
Yeah, I don't think it did me because they did so well with his look. He got into shape.
Oh.
He had the hair, the really weird hairdo that makes no sense in live action, but the pointy sides of his hair, the big mutton chops. He really personified the character, even though he's tall and skinny instead of short and stout.
Right. The hair is made to look like the mask, right? The points on the Wolverine mask. Okay.
Well, but that's how Wolverine's hair looked when he wasn't wearing the mask.
Right.
So in the comic, his hair did have that swoop.
I remember that,
yeah. But yeah, just to think about, this was the beginning of Hugh Jackman's run to where he would become I think he still holds the Guinness record for playing I don't know if it's any character or if it's specifically a superhero.
It's Marvel.
And it's even just Marvel?
Yeah, because I read just the other day that Chris Hemsworth, I don't know if it was clickbait or not, I didn't click on it, but Chris Hemsworth is going to go for the record because he's trying to pitch himself into, I think,
Deadpool 3. Yeah, I read the same. I saw the same article. Yeah. Well, but my thing is, and I know Chad and I discussed this on our Logan episode, shouldn't Patrick Stewart be in contention there, especially with the fact, spoiler warning, jump ahead 30 seconds if you need to, with the fact that he appeared in Multiverse of Madness as Professor X?
I would think so.
So I don't know if it's screen time, if that's what they're...
Yeah, I don't
it's
know
based on... yeah, I'd be very curious. I need to look into that. We could do a one-shot on that. Like, people who've played characters... Because you're even looking at, and if you're just looking at from actual time, from the day they played the character for the first time to the last time they played, if you're just looking at days, not just screen time, but the total length of time, Tobey Maguire now has to be back in that contention.
Oh, yeah.
So
2002 to this year for Spider-Man, spoiler.
Yeah. Oh, now that spoiler, that's
past.
If people haven't seen that one yet, yeah. I mean, hopefully people have seen Multiverse of Madness now that it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, but my wife, I was in one room watching X-Men for the podcast. She was in the other room watching the new Doctor Strange.
Yeah, my wife watched it last night because I saw it in theaters. I went and saw it in theaters.
Same.
But yeah, she watched it last night, and that was so. Again, yeah, it's spoilers there, but come on, you've had your chances now to see these movies. Moving on, Academy Award winner Anna Paquin took on the role of Rogue. This is probably going to create a conversation based off of of what was said here. Let me talk about some of the people who were offered the role. I found this interesting.
Okay.
I usually don't talk about people who were offered the role, but this one was interesting. Before Anna Paquin, the role of Rogue was offered to Drew Barrymore, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Christina Ricci, Katie Holmes, and Natalie Portman.
Wow.
So let me begin by saying that means that Anna Paquin was was seventh in line.
Wow. Academy Award winner.
Award winner. Anna Paquin.
Wow.
Was seventh in line based off of what I found online. But
so many better choices. Though.
That's what I was about to ask. Before we get into Anna Paquin, do you think any of those would have done Rogue better?
Yes. Like, okay.
Anyone particular?
Half the list. I had a crush on up until I married my beautiful wife. But, yeah.
Do you not think Drew Barrymore probably would have been a little too old though?
Yeah. But
part of me wonders if her being offered the role wasn't when it was supposed to be like a late 80s, early 90s movie.
Probably, like fresh off of Poison Ivy or... Yeah. Maybe even then she was an older teenager, so maybe not. I don't
know. That's my only thing about her is that I'm like, how old was she when this... I'm actually going to look it up real quick. How old was Drew Barrymore? I mean, she did Never Been Kissed in 99.
She was 5 in 82.
So she was born in 75.
Yeah.
So she was 20. Well, she would have been 24-ish, depending on when they started filming. Yeah, I still think that may be too old.
Now I know Christina Ricci was 20, or 19, because she's roughly either a year younger than me or same age.
So Anna Paquin would have been 17, 18, again, depending on when they started filming.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, Drew would have been pushing probably a little bit old. Of course, Sarah Michelle Gellar would have been, all the other ones would have been right in the right age range. Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Unknown Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Because she had not done Buffy. Well, unless you were a soap opera fan, and because she was on All My Children.
Oh, of all the ones I watched, All My Children were not the ones that I watched.
And then I'm just going to go off on Sarah Michelle Gellar for a minute here. And then also she had a teen soap opera that was called Swan's Crossing.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, yeah,
she was in that.
Yeah, she hadn't done that yet. I think Jennifer Love Hewitt was doing Party of Five around this time. Of course, Christina Ricci with the Addams Family movies and Casper. Katie Holmes with Dawson's Creek. Natalie Portman, I know, probably would have already done... Well, she definitely would have already done The Professional.
Yeah. I would have loved to have seen... See, that's another of my previous crushes, Christina Ricci. I definitely would have loved to have seen her. Just... We keep saying the Academy Award winner, Anna Paquin. I saw the movie she was nominated for an Oscar, and she was annoying. Almost as annoying as she was in this movie.
That's what I was going to ask. So what are your... she had done The Piano in 93, which is what she won the Academy Award for. One of the youngest to win an Academy Award. And here she is playing Rogue, who, again, so the character was pretty young, because the character had just debuted in 81.
Right.
The character of Rogue debuted in 81. It was in an Avengers annual. And she's actually a villain to begin with.
Right.
She's an adult. She's not a kid. She's an adult. It eventually is revealed that, not revealed because it's in this storyline, she has attacked Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, whatever you want to call her, absorbed her powers, and it was so strong, it's the reason why Rogue had a lot of the abilities she had other than the absorbing the powers. She could fly, she was super strong. That was all because of the absorbing of Captain Marvel that just kind of hung with her.
So this movie had the powers before that too. So
yeah, but we never had this Rogue in the comics at this point.
Right.
You know, they would give us kind of this version of Rogue later when they would take away the Miss Marvel powers from her, and she would just have that. And I think she even wore a cloak. Mm. This was not the Rogue we had in the comics. This was not the Rogue we had from the cartoon. That was, again, full-grown adult already, very lively, and this was a very brooding and kind of depressed Rogue most of the time.
Right. I think I wanted her to be more like she was in the animated series.
I think we all did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost as if they made her character just a mashup of all of the young, it's like she's part Rogue because of the powers and all that, but she's part like Kitty Pryde of being one of the newer X-Men and still trying to find her way in the team. And I would even say she's part Jubilee because she's the baby of the group.
Right.
And they look at her as a baby, because that was a big thing from the animated series, Jubilee was the young one. Which, funny enough, we have Jubilee and who we assume is Kitty Pryde appear in the movie.
The not Ellen Page Kitty Pryde, of course.
Yeah, that again gets me on the whole. I could have a whole 5-hour conversation about just how the timeline of these X-Men movies, the continuity makes no sense. I mean, Pyro is in this movie,
right?
But then we're not introduced to him until the next movie, and he's a completely different person.
Yeah, totally different guy.
So, yeah, that's probably... We'll get into that a little bit more. But go from Academy Award winner to future Academy Award winner, Halle Berry playing Storm. Again, I looked up who they wanted. They wanted Angela Bassett.
I saw that.
But apparently she was too expensive. So... they went with Halle Berry. She made her debut. You mentioned this earlier. Chris Claremont's Giant Size X-Men in May of 1975. What did you think of this portrayal of Storm compared to the comics and the cartoon?
Well, her performance, there was kind of an accent trying to go on there.
Yeah.
She did okay. I mean, besides the coming and going of the accent, I think she did fine.
Yeah, I don't know though, because Storm has a little bit more. I mean, Storm's like the co-captain,
right?
When they split into Team Blue and Team Gold, she was the captain of one of those teams.
Right.
Halle Berry to me never came across as she could be potentially the leader of the X-Men.
Right. Yeah, she was more of just the underling.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about him in a minute, but so was Cyclops, but he wasn't either.
Yeah, I can partly blame James Marsden for that because according to what I think I read, I don't think he was familiar with the character. I liked the kind of... He did well, I think, on the... I don't want to call it arrogance, but... the who, when Wolverine comes in, the who are you, and why are you messing everything up, and that whole feel that does come from the character. That is a Cyclops trait of, I like things the way they are, and I don't want anything to be messed with. Since we've talked about that, do you know who was not considered, but actually cast to play Cyclops?
No.
Jim Caviezel.
Jim Caviezel. Jesus?
Yes, Jesus, yes.
Wow, no, I did not know that.
Yes, he was cast. But then because of a scheduling conflict, he had to back out, and they got James Marsden.
I just looked over at my little the 95 Wizard.
Uh-huh.
The one they wanted was Michael Biehn.
Okay.
To be Cyclops.
Yeah, from Terminator, I could see that. Now that you got it up, let's go back over the other ones. So who did they, were you right about Magneto? They wanted...
Let's see. Magneto, yep, Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer, all right.
For Blade Runner,
Wolverine?
Wolverine, Glenn Danzig, not an actor.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm trying to... the name sounds familiar. I'm trying to think of who...
He was in the band Danzig, the Misfits.
Oh, okay. Okay, I knew I'd heard the name before. Well, again, we can't complain. They got an unknown to play Wolverine, so... Do they have Rogue on the list? I don't know if...
Let's see. I don't think they do.
Yeah, if you said this I don't know, because you said it was 95, right?
Yeah.
So the cartoon was out, so maybe.
Let's see. Cable, Psylocke, other people who are not in there. Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Gambit, no. I don't see a Rogue.
All right.
Storm.
Yeah.
Inman. I'm David Bowie's wife, the model.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. No Rogue.
Yeah, again, I don't know about that choice either of Iman because she wasn't really an actor.
No.
She was a model.
Angela Bassett, her being on Black Panther.
Yeah.
And, my wife and I watch 911, so I could definitely see her.
Yeah, I think she could have done it, but again, apparently she was too expensive.
Right.
They weren't willing to pay her. I mean, I wouldn't think she would be more expensive than Patrick Stewart or Ian McKellen, but
no.
They went, no, we'd rather have these two. But, okay, who did they say for Jean Grey?
Jean Grey. Nicole Kidman.
Oh, no. No. I don't care what version of Nicole Kidman you're talking. No.
I think it's just because this one picture she has red hair.
Still no.
Yeah.
I will tell you that both Selma Blair and Lucy Lawless were considered.
Oh.
But of course they went with Famke Janssen, who, to my knowledge, the only thing she had done prior to this was GoldenEye.
GoldenEye, yeah.
Where she was the female villain who killed you by wrapping her legs around you.
Mm-hmm. During intimate times, yeah.
or even not, because she does it one time to James when they're like in the jungle or something.
Well, he's James Bond. He can't be beat like that.
Yeah. So I will point out that Beast was supposed to be in the movie.
Oh, that would have been good.
Who do they say would play Beast? Because to me that's always a Kelsey Grammer.
No, they don't have Beast on here.
Well, again, to me that was another dream casting when they brought him in for X-Men The Last Stand. Yeah. I'm like, yep, that's who it always needed to be. But anyway, Beast was supposed to be in the movie. Beast was cut from the movie due to budgetary reasons. Obviously, I guess CGI issues would have been a big deal with having the character like Beast. But they didn't change a lot of the Beast parts of the movie. So that is why in this movie, Jean Grey is also a medical doctor.
Oh, okay.
Which once you realize that, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, yeah. Had it been more like the animated series, of course.
Oh, yeah.
He had the blue outfit with the lab coat and the glasses.
With the lab coat on, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I understand, the superhero movies weren't a big thing, so didn't have a huge budget to do all the special effects they probably would have wanted to do. And so something that would have been so effect heavy, even if it was makeup as Beast. I mean, they already had Sabretooth, so to do a whole nother guy completely in that getup. Plus, I mean, Toad had a lot of makeup on.
Right.
So we can hit some other people real quick. Okay. Of course, you do have Iceman, Shawn Ashmore, in a very small role. He, of course, would get bigger roles in the sequels. Him being an actual original member of the X-Men from the comics,
right?
But yet not so much in this movie. Then you had Rebecca Romaine Stamos as Mystique, Ray Park as Toad, fresh off of playing Darth Maul. He even does the Darth Maul pose with the
with his little stick.
The pipe that he gets there. Mm-hmm. WCW wrestler Tyler Mane as Sabretooth.
Oh my gosh, he's a wrestler? I didn't realize he was a wrestler.
Yeah, he wasn't a big one. He wasn't real famous, but he did wrestle for WCW for a little while. The role was actually originally offered to Kevin Nash, another wrestler.
Oh, wow. See, I have issues with Sabretooth, the character, both this movie and...
see, that's again a whole
nother... I know.
Yeah.
And when I heard that episode of your podcast, I was like, yeah, I would have went. Because I love Liev Schreiber. Would I have made him? They don't ever call him Sabretooth.
No.
So to me, he's not Sabretooth. I think I had a whole.
He's just Victor Creed.
Yeah. Anyway, would you like to know who the 95 Sabretooth prediction was? Clancy Brown.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. I could see it.
Because he was best known for his role as Kurgan from the first Highlander. And he was also in Pet Sematary 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it.
Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob.
Yeah. Lex Luthor from
Lex
Justice
Luthor,
League.
oh yeah, very good voice actor.
Yeah, he's become, and of course I'm always big of he's Headley, the head guard from Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah.
And then finally, just to go ahead and give him his mention, you had Senator Kelly, played by Bruce Davison, who some people don't know this. He is a character from the comic. He was in the television series.
Oh yeah.
He actually entered the comics in Uncanny X-Men number 135 in July of 1980. What did you think of him as the kind of side villain-ish?
It was not bad. I mean, he was more of a villain than the villains thought they were.
Yeah.
In a good character, a good movie, the villain doesn't think he's a villain.
This is true.
I think he was more of a.
Well, I think Magneto's the same way though. Magneto doesn't think he's the villain. He thinks he's.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But Senator Kelly was more of. I think he had more of the villainous tendency in his portrayal, anyway.
All right, so we got all of these characters. We just went through most of them really quickly because there's not a lot of depth to a lot of them. But of these versions of these characters, who would you have wanted to see more of? And who do you wish would just explode into a puddle of water?
Oh, that's so sad. Poor Anna Paquin. Yeah, Anna Paquin just got on my nerves and would continue to get on my nerves in the other movies.
Yeah, no more Anna Paquin.
No.
All right, so who would you? And again, I'm going to say we throw out Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart because we did see them and we're still seeing them.
Right.
So of the rest of them, who would you have wanted maybe their own solo movie?
I would have liked to have seen more of Ian McKellen as Magneto.
Yeah, because they were supposed to do an X-Men Origins movie about Magneto, but because of the failure of Wolverine, it never happened. I'm gonna say I would have liked to have seen more of Halle Berry Storm.
Right.
Not only to maybe give her a chance to flesh that character out more, but to also prevent her from ever doing Catwoman.
Yeah. Have her released right when she was supposed to do that.
Yeah.
That would have been nice.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Well, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
All right, let's get into the moving panels. We won't have an awful lot to talk about because this is actually, for the most part, an original story. Mm-hmm. Of course, you had X-Men number 1 or Uncanny X-Men number 1. The title kind of interchanges from September of 1963. That's the main connection we have because it's just about the introduction of the X-Men, the introduction of Magneto as their main villain. Of course, the X-Men was a different lineup. It was Cyclops, Beast, Iceman, Angel, and then Jean, who was known as Marvel Girl at the time. Right. But it was just the 5 of them because, again, Wolverine wouldn't come until a decade later. Rogue wouldn't come until the 80s, and Storm wouldn't come until a decade later. What are your thoughts? We kind of already talked about this a little bit, but what are your thoughts of not doing these characters, not doing Beast, not making Iceman one of the actual characters, not doing Angel? What are your thoughts?
Well, being a big fan of I'm talking about something else, the animated series.
Yeah.
I liked those characters because we always saw them. I did not like the fact that they would bring in one character from the comics, and then that was like a one shot. Like they brought in, Bishop for the Days of Future Past, and then took him away.
Cable.
I would have liked more. I would have liked more people from the comics. I liked, and I'll give you an example. I like Justice League.
So are you saying you wanted more characters? Because there's already a lot of characters.
Yeah. I was ready for this movie. I was ready for the X-Men. I didn't care about people who didn't know who these people were and didn't read the comics. I was into it. I was ready to see all my favorites on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I was too, but I don't know. I think if they had oversaturated this movie with too many of the characters, I don't think it would have succeeded.
Really?
As it did. I think it would have been too confusing. The writing would have suffered because you're having to put in, like you're saying, Bishop or Cable or Angel or Beast and Nightcrawler, all these other characters to throw them in. I think there's enough characters. I think they did a good enough job with what they had, but I don't think there needed to be more. That's just it's my opinion.
But I would have liked. I would have liked to have seen the original.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we would have all liked to have seen all of our favorites, but we're talking about a 2-hour movie, and I think this movie only runs hour and 47. I think is what this movie runs. But we got what we got. I was happy with it because again, if they had gone with this original lineup, we wouldn't have gotten Wolverine. The only other connection I could find with comics was actually Magneto's origin. The movie starts off with showing us Magneto as a kid in a concentration camp during World War II. And that storyline was actually laid out in Uncanny X-Men number 150 from October of 1981. Well, I'm not going to say it was laid out. It's brought up. Magneto in the issue talks about being in Auschwitz. But of course, the story is slightly different. He talks about his family was killed, but his powers didn't show up at that point. The powers actually showed up after he was out of the camp, and he had found a woman and married her, and they had a kid. And it was his power. And now this lays out a little bit more. It's called Classic X-Men number 12. And it's from August of 1987. There's a story in there that shows that the first time his power got used, he, without knowing it, picks up a crowbar and throws it at a man's head who's trying to short him his pay for a job. And then he's going, like, how did I do that? And all this. Then there's a whole thing where his house is on fire. His daughter and wife is trapped in the house. He's able to get his wife out, partially using his powers. But before he can get his daughter out, he's attacked by the dude he threw the crowbar at.
Right.
And so he can't focus on, because he doesn't know his powers yet. So he can't focus on saving his daughter. So his daughter dies in the fire. And then Magneto just snaps and kills everybody.
Wow.
Which then frightens his wife, who then leaves him, runs away, and pretty much says, I don't want anything to do with you. Of course, she would then go and give birth to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, Pedro and Wanda. But yeah, so we got Magneto's origin, and honestly, I've done a one-shot a while back about sympathetic villains. Can you not say Magneto is a sympathetic villain?
Well, you have to, because he's a Holocaust survivor.
Well, that's the thing. No matter which story you go with, whether it's the one from the movies or this one from the comics, in both cases, you're going, well, yeah, I understand why he did what he did. Yeah, he's going about it the wrong way, but can you blame him?
Didn't they do something similar to that in, I think, Dark Phoenix or the one before that?
You talking about with Magneto?
Well, yeah, with Fassbender, yeah.
So they had in, I think it was First Class, they had where he is tested on.
They have the Auschwitz thing in First Class. I know that.
Yeah, and they have him being tested on by Sebastian Shaw.
Oh, that's right.
And then he ends up launching the coin through his head.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, but yeah. So we got Magneto's origin. All that's really left is because we already talked about the costumes weren't even the same. Although, do you think their comic costumes would have actually been able to be pulled off in live action?
Probably not. No.
Not without looking cheesy. No. And I know both Chris Claremont and Stan Lee completely supported that. You know, that you can't have them going around in the blue and yellow costumes or Storm in this all white get up. And so, yeah, totally fine with that. Because to me, that is the first thing. And I know some people might argue that Punisher kind of did this, the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. But to me, the first thing that really this X-Men movie did to allow the following superhero movies to come was they brought superheroes into the quote-unquote real world. Would you agree with that?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, it wasn't... Because you're talking about 2000 here. So that means the only things we really had to compare to, and of course we had Blade, but you're talking about the Batman movies. Mm-hmm. And whether you're talking about Tim Burton or you're talking about Schumacher, those Batman movies are in worlds that would not exist.
Right.
Whereas here we have the X-Men that are in the real world. Yes, we've got the fantasy aspect of their superpowers, but they're in the real world. And to me, it felt more like the real world than something like going all the way back to 78 Superman, whereas Superman was in the quote-unquote real world, but there was still this kind of cartoonish aspect to even that movie.
Right.
So I feel that this helped, and it helped with the theme of the story, with, you know, what they're trying to tell of mutants being seen as different by society, you know, because this does feel like the real world, and then here are these completely different type of people existing in our real world. And so I think it did a really good job with that.
I agree.
You had brought this up, the historical comparisons. Of course, we already talked about Professor X and Magneto being compared to Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. We've got Magneto with the way that he is standing up for mutants because of him being Jewish.
Right.
And what the Jewish people went through and what he experienced. So obviously there's that parallel. Going a little bit further into kind of historical comparison, and I know people like Justin and Chad, the other Chad, I'll probably end up hearing from them once they hear this episode. But I also looked into this. Magneto's plan to quote unquote convert humanity. You know, he's wanting to mutate humanity.
Right.
Because he feels like that would end the persecution. To me, that was similar to, and I don't know how much of a history person you are, Constantine and his conversion to Christianity.
Right. I did read that the lesson the Storm is teaching them in the classroom scene is the fall, or not the fall of Rome, but the Roman Empire, and then Constantine becoming a Christian.
Yeah.
I did hear that, yes.
And then you can't help but compare Senator Kelly to Joseph McCarthy.
Right.
I mean,
trying to find a communist. Yeah.
And trying to have them, declare themselves and, yeah. So, you can't help but make those connections. And I think that's one of the other things that makes the X-Men so great is that it is so relatable to so many people because of all of that. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think this was one of, if not the, as some people would argue, movies that really impacted what we would get from superhero movies from that point on. So let's go ahead and give our final decisions. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. So go ahead, Chad. I know you're a listener, so I know you know what those mean.
Yeah, I do.
So what do you say? Do you bag it, stack it, or trade it? The 2000 X-Men movie.
As much as there's some things that I don't like about it and some things I like about it, I'm going to have to do what I did with my a lot of my X-Men and bag it.
Okay. I agree. Yeah, it's not a perfect movie.
No.
But I would definitely bag it. Like I said, it's arguably the movie that kicked off the modern superhero film. But I also like it because unlike any of the comic movies came out before, which weren't great, but it showed the depth of these characters. They weren't just superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
They were people dealing with stuff, and even dealing with them being mutants. We
Right.
had the moment where, as Senator Kelly is about to die, he asks Storm, are you afraid of humans? And she says yes, and because of the way they treat them.
Mm-hmm.
And even Logan, when Rogue says, "Does it hurt when they come out?" and he says, "Every time."
That's exactly what I was going to say. As much as I'm dissing Anna Paquin, that scene with her and Hugh in the truck.
Yeah.
That's a great scene.
Yeah.
It's very, very humanizing.
Yeah. And again, Rogue dealing with the way her powers work and how she can no longer touch people, and
Right.
she put her boyfriend into a 3-week coma. But imagine that. Imagine having a power that prevents you from having human contact. I mean, just that depth that that character would be experiencing. And then, Mystique, when she tells Kelly, it's because of people like you that I was afraid to go to school.
Right.
So it not only gives us the part about the sides they choose, because mutants have to decide how they're going to use their powers, but it also gives us characters that the audience has ways to connect with. Whether they do see them as the racial persecution,
Mm-hmm.
whether they look at them about the way that people being homosexual and having to hide that because they're afraid of what people would think.
Right.
Some people with their religion having to cover up that they're Muslim or even Christian for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
Having to cover that up from the people around them because of the way they'll be perceived. The X-Men was perfect for that. And this movie I think really relays that message of the X-Men of accepting each other for whatever you are as a person, and I think it does a great job with that. That's the reason why I'm bagging it.
Right.
But I also think the movie came out at a perfect time.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the political climate or anything. I'm talking about the perfect time to get the audience. Because you and I have been sitting here and we keep referring back to things, back to the comics, back to the animated series.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're talking about 1960s, the comic starts. So 60s and 70s. So this is now 2000. You're talking about if you were a kid reading the comic books, you're now in your 40s when the movie comes out.
All right.
If you were a kid like we were in the 80s and 90s when you had, again, the comics, but you then started getting the animated series, you're a teenager, early 20s.
Yep.
When this movie came out. That's the key demographic. I think they say the key demographic is 17 to 40 or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And this movie came out when anyone who knew, like you're saying, I went to see the X-Men, who knew who the X-Men were in the exact demographic they needed to be in to go see this movie. I don't think that would have happened if it came out in the 80s.
No. Because
you wouldn't have had the group of us who had the television show and all that.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have had that older group wanting to go see it. It would have just been younger group. And but I totally agree. It is a bag it. I couldn't talk myself into making it a stack it because, again, it's not the greatest of movies. But I'm going with it in terms of not only rewatchability. I could rewatch this movie again, but its impact. And that's why I put it into the bag it.
For me, had they made a direct, exactly like the animated series, I may have liked it more. But for what I got, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Again, we always hope to see our characters exactly the way we fell in love with them and remember them, but
true.
That's not always possible when you change from one media to another. So you go from animation to live action. Not always possible to do it exactly that way, but they got better with it as the years go along, and who knows what Disney and Marvel might have in store for the X-Men now that they have been reunited with the rest of the MCU.
I agree. I look forward to it, but I'm also kind of a little scared because you were talking about the political climates and social justice and stuff like that. I think it's going to be pretty woke. I hope not. I hope it's going to be something because Hollywood is all about that. But hopefully they'll consider people who don't care for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and we're not going to get too political here.
Yeah, no.
But at the same time, I think that's kind of what the X-Men are supposed to be, though.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
Yeah. But we're going to wrap things up today. Thank you, Chad, for joining me. Hope to have you back again to talk about another movie or have you for a one-shot to have a short little nerdy conversation.
Absolutely. I'd love to do it.
All right. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Rate and review us anywhere that you're listening to this podcast. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Share it with a friend. Let them know that we're out there. Give us those written reviews. Follow us on social media at Moving Panels or email us, movingpanels@gmail.com. But for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramie Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Is the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.